is going to be my April reading wrap up. Now, if you knew me honestly like 2 months ago, you would be shocked and stunned to find out that I'm making this video, because I just could not read. I did not read, and I was really open about it. I was like, I can't concentrate, like reading's not for me. And then a couple months ago, probably like, well, not even, like the end of March, I just had this inspiration that I was going to start reading, because I had a lot of free time, because I'm kind of in this like position between high school and university, and so I was like, do you know what, I'm gonna read a book. And that kick-started my absolute love for reading, which again, can't believe I'm saying that. So I thought I would just bring everyone along for the journey of my reading experience. So today we're going to do my April reading wrap up. Disclaimer, I'm not claiming to have come up with original new like books to read. Like, I'm sure people who are really established on booktube and like have been reading for a while, you will know all of these books and you'll have heard about them probably 1,000 times. But if you're like me and you've just started getting into reading, I think some of these books are a really good place to start, because they're really easy to follow along and they're really interesting. So yeah, this might be the video for you. The first book that I read in April was The Inheritance Games. This is the first book in the Inheritance Games series. I love this book. It basically follows Avery, and she's a teenage girl. I think she's about 17 when the book starts. She's like living out of her car, her mum's passed away. She's kind of just not got the best situation going, but she is really smart. And she goes into school one day and she gets called into the headmaster's office. She finds that there's a teenage boy there who tells her that she has to come to Hawthorne Manor for a will reading, and she's confused. She doesn't know who these people are, but she goes along anyway and finds out that Tobias Hawthorne, who's like a billionaire philanthropist, he has left almost his entire fortune to her. From there it's kind of like plot twists, a mystery almost, puzzles, and it's just a really good read. There's also a subplot of romance, which I thought was very good. I enjoyed it. So for me, this book, I thought it was a great starting point for me, because my biggest excuse or reason for not really being able to read was that I couldn't concentrate for long periods of time. And this book has like really short chapters, like a couple pages long most of the time, which made it so easy for me to just pick up and put down and kind of get into the flow of reading. I really enjoyed it. I think I gave it 4 stars on Goodreads. So yeah, very good book. The next book that I read needs absolutely no introductions. Everyone knows what this book is. Everyone's heard about it. It's Daisy Jones and the Six. I wanted to read this book before watching the TV show, because the TV show came out I think a month ago. And I was doing a lot of travelling at the start of April, so I read this pretty quick. I was just like on planes a lot. So this one I kind of flew through. I loved this book. This book follows a band during the 70s. Kind of their starting point of like going from a little town in Pittsburgh, having a small band, to being like one of the biggest bands in the world. And it also follows Daisy Jones, who comes into this band at a certain point and kind of greatly improves the band and their success. I loved this book. I loved all the characters, and that followed through onto the TV show. I just could not get enough of this world and this story. I could honestly read it again like right now. I just loved it. I loved that it was mostly, well, it was all kind of dialogue. It's written out like their name and then what they're saying, and just kind of an interview format. So I thought that was really interesting. I thought it made it quite easy to read, because it was just obviously all dialogue. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. This was, I mean, it was like the second book I read in the month, but it was my first 5-star book. And yeah, I really recommend. Not that anyone's not really read it, I'm sure most people have, but yeah. Next book that I read in April was the second book in the Inheritance Games series, called The Hawthorne Legacy. This is following on from where they left off. I kind of can't say too much about it, because I guess it counts as spoilers for the first book, but again, it's the same kind of premise. She's in the Hawthorne house. Oh, I forgot to say, she has to live in the Hawthorne house for a year. That's one of the conditions. So she's still living there. There's been like attempts on her life, you know, it's like high stakes, and there's the continued subplot of romance. So So yeah, I really enjoyed this book. I found it a really easy read. I was just like sitting outside with the book and I flew through it. I found that the characters in this series, I just like loved all of them, and I think I grew really attached to all of them. It made the book like that much more enjoyable, just the good characters that were in it. I think I give this book 4 stars as well, but I'm not sure, I might bump it up to 4.5 because I think I did enjoy this one a bit better than the first book, but I'm not too sure. But yeah, so 4.5. The next book that I read this month was It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey. This was the first romance book that I read. It's actually based off of Schitt's Creek. Well, it's not based off of Schitt's Creek. I think the girl in the book is based off of a character in Schitt's Creek. I absolutely love this book. It's kind of a grumpy sunshine like trope. She's basically an influencer who parties a lot, and she has this huge party, gets in a lot of trouble for it, and her stepdad sends her from LA to this small town where she actually was from before her dad was from this town, and she has to kind of live in this like bar that they own, which is kind of run down. And her and her sister move to this town. She meets this man here, Brendan, that's his name. She meets Brendan, and he really doesn't like her at the start. He thinks she's like stuck up and that she doesn't belong in this town, but he slowly warms up to her. Things ensue from there. One thing I will say, if you're looking for a romance and you're someone who tends to try and avoid spice, that's not going to be the book for you. I mean, you could probably skip over the scenes, like there's not that many of them, but still, if it's not something you enjoy reading, I wouldn't think you would probably enjoy this. I mean, you would enjoy the story, you just have to maybe skip over a few bits. I gave this book 4 stars, I think. I read it pretty quickly. That's one thing I will say, because I've kind of gotten into reading recently. I've noticed my time it takes me to get through a book has really picked up towards the end of the month. This book I think I read literally like a week and a half, because I don't know, I was really slow at reading. But this one I read in 4 days, which to some people is kind of slow, but to me that was really quick. And it's kind of a fat book as well, so for me. Okay, the next book that I read was One True Loves by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is the same author that wrote Daisy Jones and the Six. I thought, why not give another one of her books a try? This follows Emma. At the start of the book, she's kind of newly engaged to her fiance Sam, but previously she'd been married to a man named Jesse, and they kind of travelled the world together. But one day he goes out on like a helicopter excursion thing for work, and he doesn't come back from it. The helicopter goes missing. He's, you know, presumed dead. She's mourned him, moved on, and one night she gets a phone call from Jesse, and it turns out he's alive, and he's just been surviving like on a little, they call it an islet, but it's like, I think just a small island, I don't know. And so she has to reconnect with him and kind of decide, does she want to get back together with her husband Jesse or stay with her fiance Sam. I love this book. I read it actually really quick. I read this one like 2 or 3 days. It was a really easy read. This was the first book that I cried at. I did cry at this book, which, to be fair, I cry at like TV shows and things like a lot. So I'm not that surprised that a book was able to make me cry, but this was the one that did it for me. I was sobbing. I was like trying to read it and like not get tears in the page. So I was like, it's bad. But the book itself was amazing. I think I gave it 4.5 stars. I'm gonna double check that. That was actually a lie. I gave it 5 stars. I think in my head I like to think I'm quite picky about 5 stars, which I am, because I feel like I can't make a book 5 stars. But I was really trying to think of like something I didn't like about this so that would change, and I couldn't come up with anything, so I was like, 5 stars. Really enjoyed it, would highly recommend. I hadn't actually heard about this book on Book Talk or BookTube, but that could just be my own ignorance. I'm sure plenty of people have heard of it. I think it's getting made into a movie, so I'll maybe give that a watch. Those are all the books that I read this month. I know there's a lot of other people that read like 16 books in a month. I think, not that I'm going to read 16 books in May, but I think I'm going to build up how many books I read in a month, because I noticed at the start of the month I was kind of getting through books kind of slowly, and then by the end I was reading them in like a day, 2 days. Like I just read a book there which isn't included in this video because I technically read it in May, but I literally read it in like 24 hours. I am expecting to read more than 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 books this month. Just going to wrap this up. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Hopefully if you're a newer reader this inspired you to read some more books, or if you are already in the reading community you just enjoyed hearing me talk about some of the books that I read this month and starting my reading journey. And yeah, I will see you in the next video.